Watching a video on two rules. One is the product rule and one is the quotient rule. So the first one we're going to look at is the product rule. So in this box we have that if our function is h and we have two functions that are being multiplied together, I have f, some function f, times some other function g. Then my derivative, here's my h prime, is going to be the initial function. So f of x, that first function, times the derivative of the second function. Okay, so here's the derivative of this function, and I'm going to add my second function times the derivative of the first function. And again, these are two variable expressions being multiplied together. So let's look at this example 1. So we have f of x is x to the fourth times sine of x. So there are two distinct functions. The first function is x to the fourth. The second function is sine of x. So I'm going to find the derivative. So f prime of x, it's going to be, I'm just going to follow the rule up here. The first function, x to the fourth, times the derivative of the second function. So the derivative of sine of x is cosine of x. I'm going to add, and then the formula continues with the second function left alone. That second function is sine of x, and then times the derivative of the first function. And the derivative of x to the fourth is 4x cubed. Now this can be simplified. If it's a multiple choice question, then you're going to want to simplify it to find your answer. My answer that I give you on the board will probably be simplified, but if you are doing this problem, I want you to stop here. Leave it alone. Don't simplify. So let's look at the next one. We now have two things multiplied together. One thing is 5x plus 2 all raised to the fourth. The second thing is e raised to the x squared. So those are my two functions. So my f prime of x is going to be my first function, which is 5x plus 2 raised to the fourth, times the derivative of my second function. This is a chain rule problem. So I have the derivative of e raised to something is e raised to that same thing, then times the derivative of the inside times 2x. So that's the beginning of my product rule, the first function times the derivative of the second. Now I'm going to add that second function, leave it alone, that's my e to the x squared, and then times my first function, which this is a chain rule problem here. So that's going to be times 4 times something raised to the third. That something is 5x plus 2. Then I need to be sure and multiply by the derivative of the inside, and that derivative of the inside is 5. Again, this can be simplified, but we are not going to do that. There's your product rule. So let's move on now to the next part, which is our quotient rule. So for our quotient rule, here is the rule. And again, a quotient, we're going to have something divided by something, but this top is going to be a function. Okay, the top will be a function, not just a constant. The bottom will be a function, again, not just a constant. And then I have this formula here. So we start out, the first thing, our bottom function just goes right exactly where it was, up on the top though. Then I multiply by the derivative of the top function. I subtract the top function left alone times the derivative of the bottom function all over the bottom function squared. So let's go ahead and look at example 3. So my top function is x cubed. My bottom function is natural log of x. And let's go ahead and find our derivative. So my f prime of x is going to be, it's going to be a fraction. And I start with the bottom function is the first thing. I leave it alone, so that's natural log of x. I multiply that by the derivative of the top function. The top function is x cubed. That derivative is 3x squared. I'm going to subtract. That's different than the product rule. It was addition. And I'm going to have the top function left alone, x cubed, times the derivative of the bottom function. Derivative of the bottom function. The derivative of natural log of x is 1 over x. And then I have a quotient, so I will have a denominator, and it is the bottom function squared. My bottom function was natural log of x, and that whole thing will be squared. Again, we can leave that alone. It is simplifiable, but we're not going to do anything with it. So example 4. Again, we have a top function, which is sine of 5x. We have a bottom function, which is 8x minus 3. Again, this one's going to have chain rule. So we have f prime of x, and again, we're going to have a fraction. We start with the bottom. The bottom function is left alone. Then I'm going to multiply that by the derivative of the top function. The derivative of the top function, the derivative of sine, is cosine of the same thing, which is 5x, times the derivative of the inside, which is 5. The quotient rule is now, subtract. And we start with the top function left alone, sine of 5x, times the derivative of the bottom. The derivative of 8x minus 3 is just 8. And now my denominator is just the original denominator squared. That is your quotient rule. If you have any questions, please write them down and bring them to your teacher. Have a great day.